Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. 2021 was an incredible year for deals. They ranged from multi-billion dollar bids for the likes of Afterpay and Sydney Airport through to what seemed like daily announcements of smaller acquisitions. I wanted to have a look at what's in store for this year and what it all means for investors, and also what it's like for a company involved in that M&A activity. Alex West is the CEO of ASX-listed telco Swoop, which is backed by Andrew Forrest's Tattarang. Throughout his career at companies like Vocus Group, Alex has been involved in more than 50 company acquisitions and integrations. So he certainly knows what he's talking about. Alex, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Morning, Sean. Thank you for having me.
We'll get on to the M&A activity shortly, but tell me a little bit about Swoop, exactly what you're doing, how you're going.
Look, Swoop's an infrastructure-based telecommunications company providing mainly data services over fixed wireless to residential, small, medium business and channel customers. We were formed by the merger of Sirius Communications and Node One, and then we had a reverse listing in May of 2021 via Stemify to go onto the ASX, and it's been plenty of acquisitions since then.
Okay, so the listing, how did that process go? I'm sure listing kind of accesses capital, but there's also lots of bureaucracy, for want of a better term, involved in listing.
Look, it's definitely a process. You have to make sure that you're ready to list, so that part of being a public company is we have regular reporting cycles. At the moment, we're quarterly, but also half year and full year results. You have to make sure that your company's in a position to be able to provide those and provide a good story as you do it. So you don't necessarily want to be figuring things out as you go when you're listing. So.
Yep.
But yes, and the bureaucracy, look, it is, as with most things, it is just a process. It took us almost 12 months from the initial conversations to the time when we were listed.
Okay, so you listed on last year, as you mentioned. You've had 6 acquisitions since then, is that right?
Yes. I think it's 6, yes.
Okay, so in your business, what are you looking for when considering an acquisition? If you've taken on 6, just explain what you're looking for.
Certainly. So look, we're looking for companies that either have a product or capability that we don't have. We focus both on infrastructure companies in geographies that we're targeting, so someone that has network where we want to be, or more recently, we've looked at infrastructure that pairs quite well. So we're predominantly a fixed wireless company. We have the largest fixed wireless footprint in Australia, and we're now looking at some fibre acquisitions to pair with that fixed wireless to improve our offerings, as well as lower some of our cost base and improve some of our services. Also, look, telecommunications can be a profitability can be around scale. So, you potentially need a certain amount of scale to be able to become profitable. So now that we have a national and international network, we're looking to add customers to this both organically and through acquisition as well. And we've found more recently that we're actually able to acquire customers through acquisition far more efficiently than we would if we were doing it organically.
Is it the back office where you get the synergies that actually ensures that its earnings are accretive when you're making these acquisitions? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 2 main sources of synergies for us. Most of the companies we're looking at are quite small, so they're running fairly lean. So we're keeping all the people. But we look at sort of back office costs like finance and legal and HR that don't necessarily exist, but they'd be outsourcing. And also in telecommunications, it is about network. So we are sort of looking at cancelling supplier contracts or moving off supplier contracts onto our own network. So we're getting synergies through that space as well.
Okay, so you recently, earlier this month, you announced an acquisition, but reading it, that didn't look very wireless to me.
No, certainly not. It was all in fibre. Fibre for us, it pairs very well with fixed wireless. So we use fibre to run to our base stations to lower cost in backhaul. So we now own the backhaul to those towers, and also it allows us to increase bandwidth. Now we've obviously, as a management group, have significant experience in fibre, having previously worked at companies like Pipe Networks, which became TPG, and Vocus and Superloop and NextGen and the like. So some of Australia's largest fibre companies.
Okay, I hesitate to ask this question because I'm going to look pretty stupid.
No, that's all right.
I kind of, the whole idea of the wireless versus fibre argument, which has been going on for years now, ever since the NBN was created, it just sounds to me the answer to that, though, is fairly simple. It's fibre optic and wireless, as opposed to or wireless.
Look, absolutely. We believe that's the case, and that's our business model. So we use fibre to get to hubs, and from those hubs we use wireless to get to people's houses. So to run a fibre down the street, say 1 kilometre from a data centre to a customer, you're probably looking at around 100K of capex,
Right.
both in terms of the street restoration as well as getting into the building itself. For that same amount of capex, we could put up 2 to 3 towers and service an entire town from a 10-kilometre radius. So it's far more, fixed wireless is far more efficient to provide services at a lower cost at the bandwidth that most residences would be happy with. So we're talking now 100 to 200 meg comfortably. And the reason for that is in more recent times, there's been significant improvement in fixed wireless technology when previously 5 years ago, you were talking 5 to 10 meg, so worse than the copper that was out there. And now we're able to provide services from anywhere from 100 meg to 200 meg cost effectively, or specialist point-to-point links up to a gig for businesses that are looking for that sort of thing.
Stay with me, Alex. We'll be back in a minute. I'm speaking to Alex West, CEO of telco Swoop. So it's another point in terms of acquisitions. Technology in your area changes faster than most other areas, I would suspect. How do you know when you're buying these companies, how do you take that into account, just how fast technology is changing?
Sure. Look, obviously, we're looking forward in terms of what technology could potentially be. When we're looking at, say, fixed wireless companies where the technology is changing the fastest, we generally see that the site acquisition itself, so as in putting your equipment on top of the building, is probably the most complicated and time-consuming process, whereas changing out the equipment, particularly nowadays with how cost-effective it is a relatively low cost in comparison. So even if the technology was to shift over the next 5 to 10 years, having these sites under our control and being able to deploy new equipment on those in the areas where customers want new things, it's a relatively ezy process.
Okay.
In comparison to going off and acquiring the sites and building it from scratch.
So what's a bad acquisition look like, Alex?
So yes. Look, typically the reason why acquisitions can go wrong is you're either moving into a space that you have no experience in, potentially following technology or following something that you don't have any experience with. So you're trying to learn it as you acquire. That, or you have just cultural mismatches. So I've seen most of the acquisitions I've seen go poorly. And integrations go poorly is because the people don't have the same views in terms of how to treat customers, what an acquisition or an integration should look like, and then they potentially just go off in separate directions whilst trying to be part of the same business.
Okay, talking about integration, is there a cookie cutter approach to integration, or is it case by case?
We use the same frameworks, but you get different answers from the same question. So you're looking at who's staying, who's going, what's the culture like, what are you going to do with the office spaces, what are you going to do with your networks, and you ask generally the same questions. Those answers dictate what becomes the most important thing in terms of the integration. The one thing I have learned over time is communicate often with both sides, so both the companies that you're currently in as well as the company that you're acquiring, and be very clear about what the outlook looks like in the end goal, but then don't necessarily rush it. We've tried to rush a few over the years that haven't necessarily gone because, look, people need the time to get used to the change. And most people are happy and comfortable with the change. That they see the reason for it. Being part of a much bigger company that's growing and changing things in the industry is always exciting.
The old adage, culture trumps strategy. Is that right in terms of M&A?
Yeah, look, acquire for the right strategy, but focus on your culture. Otherwise, you'll fail. So you're generally acquiring because of a strategy, but you're integrating because you're trying to integrate culture. So if you don't get the culture right, your integration will fail and your acquisition will ultimately be a failure, and you won't get the synergies or the things. And we've seen that through some larger ones. I think there aren't that many successful larger mergers.
So just on to the more general economy and the number of massive mergers going on, and particularly last year was quite an incredible year. Is it just an easy money argument? Do you think it's going to keep going this year? What's your take on it?
Look, I can speak to my industry probably more than any others. There's always been a lot of consolidation in the telecommunications space. I think people go out and smart people leave companies and founders build great products, and then they become ultimately targets for acquisition, and they're building for an exit. Like I think I'm somewhere 50 odd in terms of acquisitions and integrations, and they've been because of that reason, that people have built something that we've wanted, either customers or network or anything else. So, and I think that'll continue, particularly as people either want to get out because COVID's been difficult, or they see this as the easiest way to survive in terms of going forward, is become part of a much larger organisation. But I can't imagine it's going to go anywhere. We IPO'd or reverse takeover last year in a period when there was that a considerable amount of capital and a long waiting list of ASX listings going on. So I think it will continue.
Do you think your plan is to continue to grow, or you're a small cap at the moment? Is the goal to become a large cap? Is the goal that, eventually the services you offer will have to be integrated into one of the bigger players? What's the strategy there?
Look, we definitely see ourselves growing into a mid-size and potentially sometime in the future a large cap company. The idea being is, I think James, my chairman, gave me a target to be a $1 billion telco by 2023.
Right.
So we're well on our way.
You're 300 million now or thereabouts?
Yeah, somewhere between, depending on the market at any one point in time, somewhere between 300 and 400 million.
Right.
And that's within 6 months. So if we continue on that trajectory, I should be there shortly. But
no pressure, Alex. No pressure.
No, look, it's a reasonable time frame would be in 2023 and particularly the end. But look, you never really know. With acquisitions, I remember I once asked someone, whilst I was at the Vocus, more so than I was here, at what point do we stop acquiring or we are ever not looking? And I think it's you never stop looking. You're never sure what opportunities are going to come up. Investors may want to move out of an organisation and then something become, people want to retire, all those sort of things that you wouldn't necessarily have planned, but you can't be asleep and not be looking or not be ready because there might be some great acquisition out there.
I suppose the other side of that is the actual customer demand. It's not like that's going to go backwards around infrastructure for broadband and telco services.
Absolutely not. I mean, we saw that over the pandemic, the demand for quality internet services or quality data services was growing. We grew through the pandemic, particularly in our residential space where people were working more from home.
Yep.
And we just see that continuing. People are looking for good quality services. The internet at home became, particularly reliable internet, became far more important when you move from just watching Netflix to you're now conducting business meetings online with
podcasts,
a board.
For example.
Yeah, podcasts, for example, this one. Yeah.
Yeah. Alex, thank you very much for talking to Fear and Greed.
No, thank you very much for having me, Sean.
That was Alex West, CEO of ASX-listed telco Swoop. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join me every morning for the full Fear and Greed podcast with all the business news you need to know. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.